To be born is to be delivered into debt, not the kind measured in coins, but the deeper, inescapable debt of suffering. No child consents to emerge into light, and yet each is dragged from the silence of non-being into the noise of existence. The first gesture of life is not laughter, but the convulsion of lungs pulling air through screams. That cry is truer than any lullaby that follows it, is the body's recognition that to exist is already to hurt. The world greets the newborn with hunger, with the cold sting of air, with a body that will forever demand appeasement. Every minute of being alive requires a payment food, warmth, breath, protection, an endless chain of conditions that must be secured simply to postpone collapse. Life is not a possession, it is a loan issued by the will, and the interest compounds daily. And yet, the spectacle of birth is clothed in celebration. The parents smile, the relatives rejoice, as if a treasure has been bestowed. But the treasure is a weight, heavy from the first breath. They do not see that in the very moment of welcoming life, they are also welcoming decay. The cradle is only the earliest version of the coffin. Both are wooden containers rocked by time. The only difference is whether the body inside still stirs. To speak honestly, existence is not a gift. It is the violation of stillness, the imposition of striving where there was once nothing. Non-being knows no hunger, no loss, no pain, yet life is stitched together from these very threads. What we call vitality is nothing more than the body's struggle to postpone its own dissolution. A flame burning is beautiful, but its beauty is inseparable from the certainty of its extinction. The world disguises this truth under ceremony. We are told that birth is sacred, that life is a miracle. But what miracle is it to be thrown into a cycle of craving and decay? A true miracle would be never to have been, to remain in the peace of nothingness, unviolated by the tyranny of need. This is the first clarity. To live is to suffer, and there is no life without this mark. It is not misfortune that some suffer while others are spared. Suffering is not the exception, but the condition of all that breathes. Life begins as a wound torn open in the silence of eternity. From the vast stillness of non-being, a cry splits the air like a jagged tear in fabric. The newborn, unknowing, is cast into a world of light that burns and sounds that shatter, as if a soul were dragged from dark waters into a shoreless storm. Existence is the ocean into which we are hurled, its waves never resting, its tides never merciful. Each wave is desire, crashing against the fragile vessel of the body, filling it with restless urgency. Hunger rises, thirst swells, longing surges, and each time the wave retreats, it carries with it the brief illusion of peace, only to gather force and strike again. To live is to drift without anchor, carried endlessly by currents that do not ask our will, yet grind us down all the same. The light that first dazzles the infant is no true illumination. It is a glare that blinds, a fire that consumes even as it warms. What we call growth, ambition, or achievement is only the flame devouring its own fuel, brighter for a moment, but closer to ash with each flicker. A candle does not rejoice in its brightness. It trembles in the certainty of its end. Even shadows offer no refuge. They remind us that where there is light, there is also the burden of time. The shadow stretches, bends, elongates, until finally it disappears into the night. Our own shadow is nothing but the silhouette of mortality trailing faithfully behind us. We may ignore it in the frenzy of daylight, but as evening falls, it overtakes us, silent and absolute. And so, the so-called miracle of birth is revealed in its true form, the breaking of stillness, the betrayal of nothingness. Before existence, there was no hunger, no loss, no grief. The unborn rest in perfect equilibrium, untouched by the storms of desire. To never have been is to remain in that calm sea where no wave rises, where no shadow lengthens, where no flame devours itself. But here we are, torn from that peace. We are waves that do not cease, shadows that cannot escape their source, flames condemned to burn out. We are the restless gesture of a will that never pauses, that thrusts us into the world only to abandon us to time's erosion. And from the first cry to the last breath, we remain caught in this rhythm of unrest, longing, failing, repeating, until silence takes us back. Life begins as a wound torn open in the silence of eternity. From the vast stillness of non-being, a cry splits the air like a jagged tear in fabric. The newborn, unknowing, is cast into a world of light that burns and sounds that shatter, as if a soul were dragged from dark waters into a shoreless storm. Existence is the ocean into which we are hurled, its waves never resting, its tides never merciful. Each wave is desire crashing against the fragile vessel of the body, filling it with restless urgency. Hunger rises, thirst swells, longing surges, and each time the wave retreats, it carries with it the brief illusion of peace, only to gather force and strike again. To live is to drift without anchor, carried endlessly by currents that do not ask our will, yet grind us down all the same. The light that first dazzles the infant is no true illumination. It is a glare that blinds, a fire that consumes even as it warms. What we call growth, ambition, or achievement is only the flame devouring its own fuel, brighter for a moment but closer to ash with each flicker. A candle does not rejoice in its brightness. It trembles in the certainty of its end. Even shadows offer no refuge. They remind us that where there is light, there is also the burden of time. The shadow stretches, bends, elongates, until finally it disappears into the night. Our own shadow is nothing but the silhouette of mortality trailing faithfully behind us. We may ignore it in the frenzy of daylight, but as evening falls, it overtakes us, silent and absolute. And so, the so-called miracle of birth is revealed in its true form, the breaking of stillness, the betrayal of nothingness. Before existence, there is no hunger, no loss, no grief. The unborn rest in perfect equilibrium, untouched by the storms of desire. To never have been is to remain in that calm sea where no wave rises, where no shadow lengthens, where no flame devours itself. But here we are, torn from that peace. We are waves that do not cease, shadows that cannot escape their source, flames condemned to burn out. We are the restless gesture of a will that never pauses, that thrusts us into the world, only to abandon us to time's erosion. And from the first cry to the last breath, we remain caught in this rhythm of unrest, longing, failing, repeating, until silence takes us back. The will is the master, and the body is its instrument. Behind every pulse of blood, every contraction of muscle, every restless thought, there throbs the will blind, ceaseless, insatiable. It does not ask if we are willing, it demands. It is not reason that animates us, but compulsion. Consider hunger. The body tightens, the mouth waters, the mind begins to circle around the thought of food. The will has stirred, and one obeys. A meal is taken, satisfaction arrives, but almost at once the hunger renews. What felt like peace was only a pause in the lash of necessity. Every pleasure is shaped like this. A brief silence between strikes, never a true reprieve. Desire is not a friend, but a tormentor. It whispers of relief, but its relief lasts only as long as it takes for a new craving to take its place. What we call life's pursuits are merely names for the disguises of desire. Love, ambition, wealth, knowledge, each is the will pressing its weight into new forms. Each is a chain that binds the soul to endless striving. We are not free. Freedom is the dream of the slave who does not see the chains. To live is to be bound to this cycle, yearning, fulfillment, yearning again. Like a wheel turning without end, it grinds us against the stones of time until nothing remains but dust. Desire is the lash of the will, and its cruelty is double-edged. When we lack what we crave, we are pierced by longing. When we achieve it, we are pierced again by its disappearance. Fulfillment is never a resting place, but the opening of a new wound. The lips that once thirsted and drank soon thirst again. The lover who once seemed eternal becomes a stranger in the light of routine. The golden prize once held loses its luster, and the hand trembles already toward another. This is why life is not a journey toward peace, but a pendulum swinging between torment and emptiness. When desire burns, we are restless, gnawed by hunger. When it is briefly quiet, we are seized by boredom, a hollow awareness of time's vacancy, more suffocating than pain itself. To be alive is to swing between fire and void, never at rest, never free of compulsion. The poets of illusion speak of joy as if it were a homeland, but joy is only a passing guest, uninvited and brief. Suffering is the native soil, and joy merely the rare flower that blooms for a season before the earth swallows it again. Even sleep, that fragile escape, is hostage to the will. We collapse into its arms as if seeking death rehearsal, but the body twitches, the mind dreams, the heart drums against the ribs even in stillness. The will mutters. Only in the abyss of dreamless sleep do we taste, for a moment, the peace of nothingness. Yet morning drags us back, and the wheel turns again. Imagine the sea in storm. Each wave rises, crashes, disappears, yet the ocean itself does not rest. So too the will. Each desire is a wave, each satisfaction its collapse, and beneath both lies the deeper unrest that cannot end. The sea does not tire of waves, and the will does not tire of longing. And here lies the first relief of clarity. To name the torment is to unmask it. To know that the hunger is endless, that the wheel cannot be stopped, is a grim form of freedom. It does not save us, but it spares us the delusion that salvation lies ahead. One breathes more heavily, but also more truly, when illusion falls away. Pain is the raw currency of existence. It circulates through the body with each pulse, waiting for the smallest crack to reveal itself. A nerve flares, a bone aches, a tooth throbs, and suddenly the whole world is reduced to a single point of torment. In those moments, philosophy, love, ambition, even memory itself dissolve. Nothing remains but the immediacy of suffering, sharp and merciless. Pain does not argue, it commands. It reminds us that our vaunted freedom is an illusion, that our flesh is a fragile leash held tightly by the will. But if pain is the lash that drives us forward, boredom is the void that swallows us when the lash is briefly still. It creeps in during silence, during still afternoons, during those rare hours when the body is not in need and the will is momentarily appeased. Suddenly, time stretches like an empty corridor with no doors. Minutes become heavy, hours unbearable. The mind writhes, inventing distractions, clawing for stimulation, terrified by the weight of its own vacancy. Thus life offers no refuge. When deprived, we suffer. When satisfied, we languish. Pain cuts us from without. Boredom corrodes us from within. This pendulum, swinging endlessly between agony and emptiness, is the true rhythm of existence. One who lives only dances to its cruel music. Even pleasures, if examined, reveal their hollow core. The feast ends in satiety that soon turns to discomfort. The lover's embrace fades into weariness or indifference. The achievement collapses into dust once the applause has died. Each joy carries within it the seed of disappointment. Each delight dissolves into tedium. What we call happiness is not a stable state, but a fleeting spark struck against the stone of necessity, bright for a moment, then swallowed by the night. The prison, then, is not built of iron or walls, but of oscillation. There is no escape from the wheel of desire, no doorway out of the pendulum's swing. Even when one seeks stillness, the will finds new disguises, new chains. The hermit, alone in the wilderness, is still bound to the hunger of the body, the itch of thought, the slow invasion of time. And yet, to see the structure is itself a dim form of liberation. When one ceases to expect lasting joy, one ceases also to be betrayed by its brevity. To accept that suffering and boredom are not intrusions, but the very atmosphere of life, is to breathe with a grim clarity. The air is no less heavy, but it is no longer confused for something else. Even our grandest pursuits are only refinements of the same cycle. Love, that fevered promise of eternity, is nothing more than the will disguising its biological command. The gaze that trembles, the heart that races, the endless longing for another, all of it is nature's trick, binding two beings together so the chain of suffering might extend into new generations. Passion burns, then fades, leaving only disillusion or repetition. The poet calls it sacred. The philosopher sees only compulsion wrapped in roses. Ambition, too, is no liberation, but another form of captivity. The worker, the artist, the statesman, each chases shadows cast by the will. To rise above others, to carve a name into time, to gather wealth and recognition, all of this is striving without end. And if one succeeds, what then? The summit offers no rest. The conqueror longs for new conquests, the wealthy for greater wealth, the genius for ever more elusive perfection. Success does not silence desire. It sharpens it into hunger that bites more deeply. Even the pursuit of knowledge, that noblest of flames, is tainted by this same unrest. The scholar dissects, the thinker inquires, the scientist unveils. But what is revealed only multiplies the questions. Each answer gives birth to 10 new riddles. Each discovery only widens the abyss of what remains unknown. The mind, too, is lashed by the will, condemned to chase clarity it will never catch. Thus the pendulum swings through every chamber of life, The body aches, the heart longs, the mind hungers, and none find rest. Fulfillment is always partial, always fleeting, always dissolving back into emptiness. And when the emptiness yawns too wide, boredom creeps in with its suffocating hands. The poet of shadows was right. Man's fate is to waver between pain and ennui, as between two abysses, never falling into peace. If we strip away illusion, this is all that remains. A wheel turning endlessly, grinding every joy into dust, every achievement into fatigue. We do not live, we are lived. We do not pursue, we are pursued. We are instruments played by the will, and the music it makes is endless, restless, discordant. But there is, in this clarity, a strange coolness. When one ceases to expect the flame to be eternal, one does not mourn when it fades. When one ceases to demand meaning of the wave, one is not broken when it crashes. The prison remains, yet the prisoner sees the walls more truly. The chains still bite, but their disguise has fallen. This is the first bitter relief of philosophy. The wound does not heal, but its shape is finally known. Human beings cannot endure the naked weight of suffering, the wheel of desire, the pendulum of pain and boredom left uncovered. It would crush the spirit into silence. And so, culture arises, not as triumph, but as disguise. Society is the great anesthetic, weaving 1,000 illusions to soften the harshness of existence. It does not cure suffering. It teaches us to forget it for a while. The most persistent illusion is that of progress. We are told that history bends towards salvation, that each invention, each discovery, each revolution draws us closer to paradise. But the truth is that technology does not free us. It only accelerates the pace of our striving. The machines we build promise rest, yet they bind us to new labors. The faster we move, the more restless we become. The cult of productivity is but a polished form of servitude, gilded chains that glimmer while they tighten. Entertainment too is woven into this fabric. Screens glow, stages fill, songs resound, each designed to divert attention from the emptiness beneath. We laugh, we thrill, we weep at shadows flickering on a wall, mistaking distraction for life itself. But when the curtain falls, the hunger returns, sharper than before. Entertainment does not save us. It only lends us to forgetfulness, until the will calls us back with its unending demands. Love is commodified, happiness marketed, identity packaged and sold. Each advertisement whispers, "You lack, but you could be fulfilled if only you buy, if only you pursue, if only you achieve." And so desire, which already rules us, is multiplied by culture until we are drowning in hungers not even our own. We are taught not only to crave, but to crave endlessly, for the economy thrives on dissatisfaction. A satisfied being would destroy the system. Thus, the system ensures that satisfaction is always out of reach. Religion, ideology, nation, these are not escapes from suffering, but narcotics against its clarity. The promise of heaven, the utopia of politics, the destiny of nations, all are stories we tell ourselves to bear the unbearable. They whisper that pain has purpose, that striving leads somewhere, that sacrifice is not wasted. But these are consolations, not truths. The grave is indifferent to creeds, and the silence beyond makes no reply to hymns or anthems. And yet how necessary these illusions seem. Without them, the nakedness of existence would be too much for most to endure. We cling to progress, love, wealth, faith, identity, as a drowning man clings to driftwood. But driftwood does not stop the sea. Every age invents its consolations, but the pattern is the same. From the earliest fires in the caves to the glowing screens of the present, mankind has sought to paint the prison walls so that the iron bars are not so stark. The myths of old, the rituals of religion, the promises of philosophy, the spectacles of empire all arise from the same desperate need to make suffering appear bearable, even meaningful. The ancient world wrapped existence in stories of gods and fates. Thunder was not mere noise, but the anger of Zeus. Harvests were not chance, but Demeter's gift. Suffering, when bound to divine will, took on the flavor of necessity, as if pain were part of some larger tapestry beyond human sight. To be struck by misfortune was to be chosen by the gods, whether for punishment or for purification. In this way, calamity was softened, no longer chaos, but destiny. Rituals, too, were woven as masks against despair. The dance around the fire, the spilling of blood upon the altar, the chants that echoed into the night, these were not mere gestures of devotion, but anesthetics. In repetition, in the illusion of communion with forces greater than the self, the sharp edge of suffering dulled. For a moment, the tribe could believe that their cries reached the heavens, that the gods listened, that anguish had an audience. Even philosophy, which prides itself on clarity, has often colluded with illusion. From Plato's vision of eternal forms to the Stoics' dream of inner serenity, thinkers have offered frameworks that transmute pain into necessity, or disguise despair as virtue. The sage who teaches acceptance, the mystic who preaches transcendence, both weave the same veil, that suffering is not meaningless, but a path to some hidden order. And then there is the great narcotic of happiness itself, promised in every age under different names. The ancients called it eudaimonia, the alignment with reason and virtue. The medievals called it salvation, eternal bliss in the presence of God. The moderns call it fulfillment, self-actualization, the good life, always the same mirage, always receding. Happiness is sold as a destination, yet it remains only a flicker, a pause between hunger and hunger again. To seek happiness is to chase the horizon. The further you walk, the further it retreats. The forms change, but the function is constant. Myths, rituals, philosophies, ideologies, promises all serve the same end: to make the prison appear a palace, to turn the wheel of suffering into the image of progress, to paint over the abyss with the colors of hope. But the abyss does not vanish. It waits beneath every story, beneath every festival, beneath every hymn. The masks may change, but the face beneath remains the same: the will, restless and unappeased. The ancient myths have faded, yet illusion has not weakened. It has only changed its attire. Where once men bowed before altars, they now bow before the glowing glass of their machines. Where once hymns promised eternity, now advertisements promise fulfillment. The ritual is no less devout, only less honest. Modernity flatters itself as an age of enlightenment, liberated from superstition. But superstition has merely been replaced with subtler gods: technology, progress, individuality. The temples are not ruined. They have become towers of glass, screens, markets. The priests are not robed. They wear the suits of executives, the white coats of scientists, the polished smiles of influencers. Each assures us that salvation is near, that the newest device, the latest ideology, the next horizon of productivity will deliver us from our unrest. Consumerism is perhaps the clearest mask. Desire, which already torments the soul, is multiplied and manufactured until it becomes the engine of entire economies. We are told we are incomplete, but completion is available for purchase. A new garment, a new phone, a new image of the self projected into the endless mirrors of social media. Yet the hunger does not fade. Each acquisition dissolves into boredom, each possession into obsolescence. The market thrives on the endless dissatisfaction of its worshippers. A satisfied being is useless to the economy. Thus, the economy ensures none can ever be satisfied. The cult of productivity deepens this slavery. We are told to optimize, to maximize, to become efficient engines of labor. Rest itself becomes suspect, idleness a sin. Yet all the toil only feeds the machine, which demands more as soon as we have given enough. The worker polishes his own chains, priding himself on their shine, never realizing they cut more deeply with every year. And then there is the narcotic of the self. Modernity proclaims, be yourself, find yourself, express yourself. But the self it speaks of is not liberation. It is a product, endlessly curated, performed, marketed. Social life becomes a stage where masks are worn not only for others, but for ourselves. We become actors who believe in their own roles, trapped in the performance of identity, terrified of silence, lest the hollowness beneath be revealed. Even progress itself, the great myth of the modern mind, is a disguise. Each invention solves a problem only to birth new torments. The train becomes the automobile, becomes the airplane, yet we are no closer to rest, only moving faster toward nowhere. Medicine prolongs life, but also prolongs suffering. Connectivity unites the globe, yet isolates the individual more deeply than ever. We are told history marches toward liberation, but it marches only toward the grave, dragging us along more frantically with each passing decade. Thus, modern illusions are not weaker than ancient ones. They are stronger, precisely because they seem rational, secular, inevitable. One may scoff at myths of gods, but who dares scoff at the myth of progress? One may laugh at rituals of sacrifice, but who questions the sacrifice of one's hours, one's years, at the altar of work? The old idols have fallen, but the will has carved new ones from steel and silicon, and still the abyss waits, unchanged, beneath the mask. No illusion has been sold more insistently or more profitably than the myth of happiness. It stands above all others as the crown of sedations, the idea that life is meant to be joyous, that suffering is an accident to be overcome, that fulfillment awaits if only we see correctly. In every age, this promise has worn different clothing. The ancients cloaked it in virtue and harmony. To live in accordance with reason was to dwell in contentment. The medievals draped it in theology. To endure suffering was to earn eternal bliss. The moderns clothe it in psychology, productivity, consumerism. To love yourself, to achieve your dreams, to buy the right objects, is to finally arrive at peace. But the garment may change. The body beneath does not. Happiness is not a homeland. It is a phantom. It appears only as a fleeting shimmer between hunger and boredom, between striving and collapse. It cannot be possessed, for possession dissolves it. The moment you notice happiness, it has already fled. It survives only as memory or anticipation, never as present fact. And yet the pursuit of happiness is elevated to the highest law of existence. Nations enshrine it in their constitutions. Religions disguise it as salvation. Industries profit from selling it in endless fragments. The human being is told, if you are not happy, you are failing. Thus the torment deepens, for suffering which is inevitable is now doubled by the belief that it ought not to exist. This is the cruelty of the happiness myth. It transforms the universal condition of pain into personal failure. The one who suffers believes not only that life is hard, but that he has erred, that he is deficient, that he has not chosen correctly. The wound of existence becomes a wound of shame, and so he strives harder, consumes more, prays more fervently, works more desperately, all in the hope of securing what cannot be secured. Fulfillment, too, is woven into this illusion. We are told we must find ourselves, as if the self were a hidden treasure buried beneath layers of confusion. But the self is not a thing to be found. It is a mask worn by the will, shifting with time, unraveling with age. To seek fulfillment is to chase a shadow cast by a fire that is itself burning out. The promise of happiness, then, is not merely a lie but a weapon. It binds us to striving, multiplies our hungers, and ensures that the wheel of the will turns without pause. It is the most elegant illusion because it persuades us to lash ourselves. We become the jailers of our own prison, chasing joy through corridors that lead only back to suffering. And yet, when the mask falls, when one sees happiness for what it is, a fleeting accident, never a possession, there is again that strange relief. The torment remains, but the deception weakens. One no longer clings so tightly to phantom. The abyss is not filled, but it is at least no longer painted with false colors. To suffer is not to fail. To despair is not to err. It is only to exist. All illusions tremble before death. Myths, rituals, ideologies, consumer dreams, the bright narcotic of happiness each is a fragile veil stretched over the grave. They may soothe us in youth when death seems distant, but as the years bend the body and the bones whisper their fragility, the veil grows thin. No promise of progress halts decay. No advertisement cancels the tumor or stills the tremor of hands. No ideology arrests the fading of memory. Death advances, indifferent to all banners. Religion whispers of eternity. Progress sings of posterity. Self-help insists on fulfillment. But in the last hour, these voices falter. The believer faces silence no less than the skeptic. The patriot dies alone, not with his nation. The optimist clings to breath with the same trembling despair as the pessimist. Illusion cannot alter the final fact. Every life ends, every striving is undone, every mask falls into dust. And yet, death does not merely end life, it exposes it. It reveals that the meanings we clung to were not inherent, but borrowed, fragile constructions against the void. The rituals and myths gave structure, but only temporarily, like scaffolding around a collapsing house. The house falls regardless. The scaffolding goes with it. What then is revealed when all masks are gone? That life was never paradise, never a path toward fulfillment, never a story written toward triumph. It was only the restless will, driving bodies forward until their fuel was spent. The illusions softened the ride, but the destination was unchanged. To see this is not to escape suffering, but to suffer without disguise. And, paradoxically, this bare suffering is lighter than the weight of illusion. For when one ceases to expect salvation, one ceases to be betrayed. Pain remains, boredom remains, decay remains, but the cruel lie that there was ever meant to be more is finally silent. What is left is what always was, the stillness behind the masks, the abyss that needs no decoration. Of all the masks the will wears, love is the most enchanting and the most cruel. It glitters with the promise of eternity, whispers of completion, insists that in another being we shall be whole. Lovers believe themselves chosen, as if some divine hand had united them across the abyss of chance. But beneath this poetry lurks biology, blind and indifferent. What we call romance is only the will's stratagem for reproduction. The flutter of the heart, the trembling of the hands, the obsession that devours reason, these are not proofs of destiny, but compulsions carefully crafted by nature to deceive us. The individual believes he loves for himself, but in truth he is a vessel through which the species perpetuates its suffering. The will disguises compulsion as passion, bondage as freedom. The cruelty is doubled. Passion burns fiercely, then fades. What once seemed eternal becomes ordinary. The beloved becomes familiar. Desire wanes into habit. The ecstasy collapses into routine. The promise into disillusion. Lovers either part or remain together, bound not by fire, but by repetition, two prisoners sharing the same cell, clinging to memories of a vanished flame. Even when children are born, what is revealed is not fulfillment, but the will's triumph. The newborn, innocent and fragile, inherits the same sentence: to hunger, to suffer, to strive until death. Parents believe they act out of love, but in truth they have merely allowed the wheel to turn again, chaining another to the cycle of desire and boredom. The myth of the soulmate, that there is one perfect being who will resolve our solitude, is perhaps the most exquisite lie, for even if such a union were found, it would not halt the pendulum of existence. Hunger and boredom would still gnaw, time would still erode, death would still arrive, tearing apart what seemed indivisible. The promise of eternal love is only the will's bait, luring us deeper into its prison. And yet, stripped of illusion, love remains no less powerful. It is not a mistake of the individual, but the most cunning trick of life itself. To know this is not to escape its grip, but to see clearly why it binds us, not for our joy, but for the will's persistence. If love is the will's bait, ambition is its whip. The hunger to rise, to be seen, to conquer, to engrave one's name into the stone of time, this is praised as greatness, but it is only another form of bondage. The worker labors, not because he wishes, but because necessity demands it. His hours are sacrificed to the wheel, his body spent in exchange for survival. He believes he works for his family, for his future, for his dreams. But beneath these noble words lies the simple truth. He works because he must, because hunger is relentless and the body refuses to wait. His labor is not freedom, but submission disguised as dignity. The ambitious man imagines he is different. He does not toil merely to survive, but to ascend, to dominate, to be remembered. Yet his striving is no freer than the workers. The hunger for recognition is as compulsive as the hunger for bread. He climbs the ladder, rung by rung, only to discover there is no summit, only further heights that demand to be scaled. Each achievement is consumed by dissatisfaction, each victory poisoned by the will's demand for more. The cruelest irony is that success is emptier than failure. The one who fails still dreams of triumph, still imagines salvation lies just ahead. But the one who succeeds discovers the mirage, dissolves upon arrival. The wealthiest long for greater wealth, the powerful for greater power, the genius for greater genius. The summit is only another desert, windswept and barren. Thus both the worker and the conqueror remain prisoners, though their chains differ in polish. One is shackled by necessity, the other by ambition. One polishes his chains to survive, the other polishes them to shine, but both are bound to the same will, both are dragged forward toward the same inevitable dissolution. We celebrate ambition as progress, as glory, as the mark of humanity's greatness. But strip away the banners, the speeches, the monuments, and what remains? Exhausted bodies, restless minds, the same endless repetition of striving. The empire collapses, the name fades, the wealth disperses. All is swallowed by time, and the wheel turns again. Religion and ideology are the most elaborate disguises the will has ever woven. Where love deceives through passion and ambition through hunger, faith deceives through meaning. It whispers, your suffering has a purpose, your striving a destination, your death a door into eternity. To the believer, pain is no longer meaningless. It is transformed into sacrifice. The wounds of the body are painted as steps on a ladder reaching toward heaven. The injustices of the world are softened by the promise of divine justice to come. The grave is recast not as annihilation, but as passage into a realm where all tears are wiped away. But what are these promises, if not the dreams of the terrified, projected against the silence of the void? Ideology is the secular twin of faith. It offers not heaven but utopia, not eternity but progress, not salvation of the soul but redemption of the species. It tells the worker that his suffering builds the future, the soldier that his death defends the nation, the thinker that his vision will reshape the world. Yet the future arrives and it too suffers. The nation survives and it too decays. The world reshapes, but the will remains, gnawing, restless, unappeased. Religion and ideology thus function as anesthetics, dulling the awareness of futility by painting torment as destiny. They turn suffering into currency, as if agony were a down payment on paradise. But death strips the lie bare. The believer and the skeptic lie side by side in the same soil, the same silence. The slogans fade, the hymns grow still, the flags rot to rags. No kingdom endures, no ideology redeems, no heaven answers. And so, the three great masks fall: love, ambition, faith. Each promised escape, each delivered only deeper bondage. Life remains what it always was, the ceaseless striving of the will, turning in its own cage, devouring itself. And yet, there is one more veil, fragile and fleeting, unlike the others. Not a lie, but a pause. Not a mask, but a glimpse. This is the veil of art and beauty. In moments of true aesthetic experience, the will is briefly silenced. A piece of music drifts through the air, and for an instant, the listener is no longer a striving creature, but a pure eye of contemplation. A painting holds the gaze, and the gnawing hunger of the body loosens its grip. A poem, a tragedy, a sculpture, each has the power to suspend the restless turning of the wheel, to reveal the world not as fuel for desire, but as form, image, essence. This is why art carries the flavor of transcendence. It does not save, but it suspends. It is the momentary liberation of the self from its own bondage. To look at the sea and see not a resource, not a danger, not a path of conquest, but simply the sea vast, indifferent, still is to slip, however briefly, outside the chains of the will. But beauty is a fragile reprieve. The music fades, the painting is left behind, the curtain falls, the will stirs again, hungrier than before. The return is cruel precisely because the escape was real, if only for a moment. Art consoles, but it does not deliver. It gives us the taste of stillness, but not the power to remain in it. Art does not heal, but it suspends. It lifts us for a moment above the restless wheel, showing us a vision of existence without demand. Music flows like a river through the cracks of suffering, carrying us beyond the prison walls, though never out of them. Beauty is the faint breeze that passes through a locked cell. It reminds us there is an air beyond these stones, even if we cannot remain in it. For the artist, this gift is also a curse. The genius sees more clearly than others, feels more sharply the fracture between what is and what might be glimpsed. He becomes the wound that cannot close, compelled to shape his torment into sound, color, word, only to find each creation inadequate, each masterpiece another failure to hold onto the stillness that slips away. To create is to betray the vision, and yet to remain silent is to suffocate beneath it. Thus, genius suffers most, a life caught between the silence of the abyss and the cry of expression. And so, beauty remains a pause, never a solution, a delicate veil, easily torn, beneath which the same restless will stirs. The music stops, the brush dries, the stage grows dark. Hunger returns, the wheel resumes. The soul is cast back into its cage, reminded that even its moments of transcendence are bound to time. But in those fleeting instants, when the will loosens its grip, something is revealed. The possibility of a world without compulsion, a silence deeper than joy or sorrow. Art gestures toward it, but cannot grant it. For that stillness lies not in creation, nor in striving, but only in the final horizon that waits for all. Death is the only certainty, the only true horizon of life. It is the silence that ends the ceaseless song of the will, the stillness that swallows every hunger, every fear, every illusion. From the moment of birth, it is the destination toward which every step moves, though most walk with eyes averted, pretending the road continues forever. We clothe death in euphemisms, in ceremonies, in promises of continuation. We speak of passing on, of eternal life, of reunion beyond the veil. But death is not passage, it is erasure. It is the undoing of the will, the extinguishing of the flame, the vanishing of the self into the same silence from which it was torn at birth. And yet, this horizon is not merely terror, it is also release. For what is death, if not the only true liberation from the lash of desire? Hunger cannot pierce the silent body. Ambition cannot disturb the dust. Boredom does not reach the grave. Death is the only point at which the will finally loses its grip. The torment of striving ends not in fulfillment, but in nothingness. Death is the only horizon, the boundary line drawn at birth. From the first cry, the body begins its slow undoing, each breath both preservation and diminishment. To live is to move toward death in every instant, as if each step were the turning of a wheel that grinds us thinner, until only silence remains. We do not deny death because it is uncertain, but because it is certain. The body resists the truth with rituals, with myths, with promises. Religions whisper of eternal souls, philosophies of immortal reason, ideologies of posterity. The individual hides behind euphemisms, passing on, better place, afterlife. Yet none of these soften the reality. Death is not transformation but erasure, the extinguishing of the flame without remainder. This is why we fear it, not for the pain, but for the nothingness. The self clings to continuity, inventing heavens and reincarnations, desperate to believe that the thread does not break. Yet to cease is not to be imprisoned, but to vanish. Death is the undoing of the will itself, and the will trembles at the thought of its own silence. But if we look closely, without illusion, what appears terrifying reveals itself as the only mercy. Hunger cannot cross the threshold. Loss cannot pierce the dust. Boredom does not trouble the grave. What life cannot grant stillness, freedom from compulsion, the end of striving death grants without effort. It is not reward, but cessation, not fulfillment, but release. The lash falls silent, and the prisoner no longer stirs. To never have been is the purest mercy, for the unborn suffer no loss, and to cease being is the second mercy, for the dead are beyond the reach of torment. It is the living who suffer bound to the wheel, devoured by desire, gnawed by time. Death does not harm us, life does. Death is the absence of harm, the silence after the storm, the extinguished flame that no longer knows it ever burned. And so, the final clarity dawns. Life is not a path to meaning, but a cycle of compulsion. Its illusions are many, its disguise is endless, but its truth is simple. We are lived by the will until the will releases us. There is no salvation, no triumph, no final reconciliation, only the stillness of surrender, the sober acceptance that nothing lies beyond. This is not defeat, for there was never a battle. It is not failure, for nothing was promised. It is simply what is. To see it clearly is the last and only liberation. To cease demanding joy is to cease being betrayed by its absence. To cease clinging to life as gift is to see it as burden, borne until it falls away. And when the voice fades, when the last illusion dissolves, there is no grand ending, no blaze of revelation. There is only the vanishing desire thinning into silence, the self dissolving into stillness, the wheel of the will stilled at last. No conclusion, only disappearance.